April, 1945. The air hung heavy with the stench of death and diesel. The once vibrant cities now lay in ruins, a testament to the relentless bombardment and fierce ground battles that had raged for months. Germany, once a proud and defiant beast, now thrashed in its death throes. The streets, once filled with the sounds of daily life, were now eerily silent, save for the distant echoes of artillery fire and the occasional rumble of tanks. The Allied armies, a relentless tide of steel and fury, closed in on Berlin, the heart of the Nazi regime. Their advance was marked by determination and a grim resolve to end the tyranny that had gripped Europe for so long. Each explosion, each burst of gunfire, hammered the final nails into the coffin of Hitler's Reich. The once invincible war machine was now a shadow of its former self, crumbling under the weight of the Allied onslaught. Victory was within reach, but the cost of seizing it remained terrifyingly high. The soldiers, weary and battle-hardened, knew that each step forward could be their last. The price of freedom was paid in blood, sweat, and tears. The thunder of war reverberated across the shattered landscape. The once bustling cities were now ghost towns, their buildings reduced to rubble, their streets littered with the remnants of a brutal conflict. For the weary soldiers of the Western Allies, the German heartland represented the culmination of years of brutal conflict. They had faced unimaginable horrors and had seen comrades fall, but their resolve remained unbroken. From the beaches of Normandy to the hedgerows of France, they had fought their way eastward, step by blood-soaked step. Each battle had brought them closer to this moment, the final push towards Berlin. Now, with Berlin in their sights, they prepared to deliver the final blow. The city, once a symbol of Nazi power, was now the last bastion of a crumbling regime. The end was near, but the fight was far from over. The German resistance, though battered and broken, remained fierce. The defenders, many of them young and inexperienced, fought with a desperation born of fear and indoctrination. Fanatical defenders, imbued with Nazi ideology, clung to their positions with the desperation of the doomed. They knew that surrender was not an option, that to give up was to face the wrath of the advancing Soviets or the judgment of the Allies. They knew surrender meant likely imprisonment or worse, death at the hands of the vengeful Soviets approaching from the east. The end of the war was in sight, but the final days would be some of the bloodiest and most brutal of the entire conflict. Among the Allied forces poised to strike at Berlin was the crew of the Sherman tank Fury. This tank, a symbol of resilience and power, was more than just a machine. It was a lifeline for the men who operated it. Each member of the crew had a unique story, a personal battle that intertwined with the larger conflict they were part of. Leading them was Sergeant Don Wardaddy Collier, a hardened veteran whose steely gaze reflected years of relentless combat. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, had seen the worst of humanity, and yet they held a glimmer of hope, a determination to see the mission through. His face, weathered and creased like a worn leather saddlebag, bore the indelible marks of war. Each line and scar told a story of survival, of battles fought and comrades lost. It was a face that had become a map of the war itself, etched with the memories of countless skirmishes and narrow escapes. Collier was more than just a commander to his men. He was their surrogate father, their protector, their shield against the horrors of war. He had a way of instilling confidence and courage in his crew, even in the direst of circumstances. His leadership was a beacon of strength, guiding them through the darkest days. He led with a gruff demeanor that masked a deep well of loyalty and compassion for his crew. Beneath the stern exterior was a man who cared deeply for each of his men, who would go to any lengths to ensure their safety. His gruffness was a shield, protecting his own heart from the pain of loss and the fear of failure. Their survival, their brotherhood forged in the crucible of combat, was paramount. The bond they shared was unbreakable, a testament to the trials they had endured together. In the heat of battle, they moved as one, each man knowing his role and trusting his comrades implicitly. There was Boyd Bible Swan, the stoic gunner, his faith tested but unbroken by the horrors he had witnessed. His calm demeanor and steady hand were invaluable in the chaos of combat. Despite the carnage around him, he held on to his beliefs, finding solace in his faith. Grady Kunas Travis, the quick-witted driver, masked his fear with a veneer of gallows humor. His jokes and jests were a lifeline for the crew, a way to keep the darkness at bay. In the face of danger, his humor was a reminder of their humanity, a spark of light in the gloom. And Trini Gordo Garcia, the loyal loader who muttered prayers in Spanish as he fed shells into the Sherman's hungry maw. His prayers were a constant, a rhythm that kept him focused and grounded. Each shell he loaded was a testament to his dedication, a silent promise to his comrades. They were a band of brothers, bound by the shared experience of war, their fates intertwined with the fate of their steel chariot. The tank was their home, their fortress, and their weapon. Together, they faced the enemy, their unity a force to be reckoned with. These men, veterans all, had faced down panzer divisions and weathered the storms of artillery barrages. They had stood their ground against overwhelming odds, their courage and tenacity a testament to their training and their bond. Each battle was a test, and each victory a hard-won prize. They had seen comrades fall, their bodies torn apart by German fire. The loss of each man was a heavy blow, a reminder of the cost of war. Yet, they pressed on, driven by a sense of duty and a desire to honor the fallen by continuing the fight. They had tasted victory and defeat, and they understood that survival was a fickle mistress in the chaos of war. Each day was a battle, each moment a struggle to stay alive. But through it all they remained steadfast, their resolve unbroken, their spirit undimmed. The story of War Daddy's boys is one of courage, brotherhood, and the unyielding will to survive. Their latest mission was a dangerous one, to spearhead a push deep behind enemy lines, disrupting German supply lines and sowing chaos in the Wehrmacht's defenses. The stakes were incredibly high, and the risks even higher. The soldiers knew that failure was not an option. The success of this mission could potentially shorten the war and save countless lives. It was a gamble, a risky thrust into the heart of enemy territory, but one deemed necessary to break the back of the German resistance. The commanders had meticulously planned every detail, but in war, plans often go awry. The soldiers were prepared for the unexpected, knowing that adaptability could mean the difference between life and death. The terrain they were ordered to traverse was a nightmare. Dense forests, muddy fields, and treacherous hills made the advance slow and perilous. The soldiers had to navigate through minefields and barbed wire, all while under the constant threat of enemy fire. Shattered villages reduced to rubble-strewn streets offered little cover. The once thriving communities were now ghost towns, silent witnesses to the horrors of war. The soldiers moved cautiously, aware that every corner could hide a deadly ambush. The air hung heavy with the stench of cordite and decaying flesh. The constant bombardment had turned the landscape into a hellish tableau, where the living and the dead coexisted in a grim dance of survival. The soldiers' senses were on high alert, every sound and smell a potential warning of imminent danger. Hidden German anti-tank guns, their crews desperate to sell their lives dearly, lay in wait, ready to ambush the advancing Americans. These hidden threats were a constant menace, capable of turning the tide of battle in an instant. The soldiers had to remain vigilant, their eyes scanning the terrain for any sign of danger. Collier, his map spread out on the back of his tank, studied their route with a practiced eye. He had been through countless battles, each one leaving its mark on him. His experience was invaluable, and his men trusted his judgment implicitly. He knew the dangers they faced. Every decision he made could mean the difference between success and failure, life and death. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but Collier bore it with a stoic determination. Every mile they advanced deeper into German territory increased the likelihood of encountering fanatical resistance. The German soldiers were fighting with a desperate ferocity, knowing that their homeland was at stake. The Americans had to be prepared for anything, their resolve tested at every turn. But he also knew the importance of their mission. This was not just another battle, it was a crucial step towards victory. The soldiers were motivated by a deep sense of duty, their determination fueled by the hope of bringing an end to the war. Every German tank destroyed, every supply line cut, brought them one step closer to ending the war. The soldiers knew that their actions had a direct impact on the larger strategy, and they fought with a fierce resolve. "This is it, boys," he rasped, his voice roughened by fatigue and countless cigarettes. The weight of the moment was palpable, the tension almost unbearable. The soldiers looked to their commander, their faces a mix of determination and fear. "We punch through their lines, raise hell, and give the Krauts something to think about besides Berlin." The plan was simple but audacious, relying on speed and surprise to overwhelm the enemy. The soldiers knew that they had to act quickly and decisively. "We hit them hard and fast before they know what hit them." The order was given and the soldiers sprang into action, their training and instincts guiding them through the chaos of battle. The fate of the mission, and perhaps the war itself, hung in the balance. Their already dangerous mission was further complicated by the arrival of a new crew member, Private Norman Ellison, a fresh-faced clerk pulled from the rear echelon and thrust into the maelstrom of combat. He was young, barely old enough to shave, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and naive excitement. Ellison was everything the veterans of Fury were not. He was innocent, untested, his hands still soft, his mind unburdened by the horrors of war. He had yet to experience the gut-wrenching terror of incoming artillery, the sickening thud of a bullet finding its mark, the all-consuming stench of death that permeated the battlefield. His arrival was met with a mixture of apprehension and resentment. The veterans, hardened by combat, viewed him as a liability, a burden they could ill afford in the heat of battle. They knew the harsh reality green replacements had a habit of getting themselves killed, and sometimes they took veterans with them. "Another mouth to feed," Grady muttered, shaking his head. "Hope the kid knows how to pray." As Fury rumbled forward, the full fury of the German army slammed into them. The sky erupted in a storm of steel and fire. Artillery shells fired from unseen positions rained down around them, each explosion shaking the earth and showering the tank in a hail of shrapnel. Jagdpanthers, German tank destroyers with high-velocity guns capable of piercing the Sherman's armor, emerged from concealed positions, their long barrels spitting fire. The air crackled with the whine of approaching mortar rounds. Machine gun fire, deadly in its intensity, zipped through the air, seeking out any exposed flesh. "Panzerfaust! 12 o'clock!" Gordo shouted, his voice barely audible above the din. A German soldier, his face contorted in a mask of hatred, emerged from a nearby building, a Panzerfaust anti-tank weapon clutched in his hands. The rocket-propelled grenade, trailing a thin plume of smoke, slammed into Fury's hull with a deafening explosion.